Tonight, inflation up in America.
We have a lot more work to do. We have a plan, and it's turning things around.
The latest on the economy and what it means for your bank account. Plus,
the whole town was devastated. The whole town was decimated.
A look at the deadly wildfires terrorizing Hawaii. And
people wanted to, they could come across at any time.
The surprising issue of illegal immigration at the northern border. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A stall in the slowdown of inflation. Good evening in Washington. I'm Caitlin Burke. We'll get to the economy in a moment, but we begin tonight with the devastating scene out of Hawaii. Wildfires are raging on the island of Maui, and as firefighters race to put out the flames, the search is on for survivors. So far, 36 people are reported dead. Rescue workers fear that number will rise as the fast-moving fires continue to spread. Dry conditions onshore combined with high winds from an offshore hurricane aren't doing much to help with containment.
There are reports of gusts of up to 85 miles per hour. So, that is so fast. As an example, the military helicopters, their limitation to start the aircraft or shut down is 45 knots, so about 30-something miles per hour. And it was far in excess of that. So we couldn't get those helicopters into the fire suppression mission until today.
Evacuations are in effect tonight across Maui. As many as 11,000 tourists have already been taken off the island. Thousands who live there are still facing power outages, and the National Guard has now been called in to help. This afternoon, President Biden offering his prayers and all available federal resources. Here now for more is Pastor Jonathan Laurie. He's the executive pastor at Harvest Christian Fellowship, which has a campus in Maui. Jonathan, first, I'd just like to get your reaction when you see the devastation, the images coming out of Hawaii. What's been going through your mind?
Oh, we are reeling. It's been terrible to see. And as we woke up Wednesday morning and these images were flashing across the screens on our phones, we were just blown away. This is a community we've been going to for many years. Personally, I've grown up with friends and family over on the island of Maui. And so this is a community I'm familiar with. And seeing all the familiar sites just absolutely decimated, burned to the ground, it's really hard to comprehend. It's been quite surreal watching all the different social media posts come across and updates through the day and hearing the death toll. Our hearts are just broken for what's happening for the people there in Lahaina.
One of my colleagues, Wendy Griffith, was just at Harvest Maui campus with you and your parents. She got to see some baptisms while she was reporting out there. Can you tell us about the faith on the island? What role does that church play there? Yeah.
Harvest Kumulani, we have been partnered with them for about 7 years now, but it's a church that's existed for over 20. And since we've been partnered with them just in this short time, we've seen 2,000 people make a profession of faith. My dad's an evangelist. He loves to preach the gospel, and we love to see people come into a relationship with Christ. And so this little church on this little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean has really been a bastion of evangelism, just seeing people come from all over, not just the island, but the world as well, to come in and tour Maui and see the beautiful sights. And they show up to church and they hear the gospel message. And so we do local outreaches. We do so much for the local community there. And it's been a great partnership, and we love them. And a number of people in our churches, in our church over our campus up in Kapalua, which is about 10 miles from Lahaina north, about 10 families or more that we know of already have lost their homes, lost their businesses, had to run out of the house in the middle of the night because they heard the evacuation call, and they're unable to take anything with them except the clothes on their back and their families. And we're just, it's harrowing, these images.
They are, and I'm sure that disaster outreach was not top of mind for the church there, but how have you all come up with to minister and help those affected by the devastating fires that we've seen?
Well, we're still in the immediate aftermath, and we're actually having a hard time getting a hold of our own team that's on the ground there. Power is down, internet service is down, water lines are down, and so even though they're is communities that are unaffected by the wildfires. There is residual effects where they're unable to get a phone call out. And so a number of our team, we haven't been able to hear from them over the phone, though we have confirmed that they're okay just by each other visiting each other's homes and checking in on one another. But it's been tremendously hard. We're praying, all the team that is there are meeting with people in the communities, in the neighborhoods, praying for people. We have people staying at our church campus inside the building there. And really, as much as we can do right now, we're aware that the Red Cross is on site, FEMA's on site. We heard that President Biden had released some emergency funds, and so that's all welcome. That needs to happen for sure. We also know Samaritan's Purse has dispatched a team as well, and so we're looking forward to having their help out there. They need it.
How can we be praying for Maui right now, as this is very much still an ongoing event? Yeah. That's a great question. Well, we need to be praying for the peace of the people that are there. We need to be praying for their safety. I heard officials saying that they're up to 10 days out from having electricity. And so this is going to be an ongoing thing that's going on for at least a couple of weeks as they try and just get power sorted out. But we can be praying for the people there, for their peace, ultimately that they would come to see that they need to put their hope in God. Because we know that these things happen, you know, in this world, you will have tribulation, Jesus said, but take heart because I've overcome the world. And so in addition to praying and sending our thoughts Jonathan,
and prayers.
I'm sorry, we've got to cut it there, but we will definitely be praying, and I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Looking at the economy now, consumer prices are once again on the rise. The spike after 12 straight months of dropping inflation. The July Consumer Price Index hit 3.2%, which is up from 3% in June. While high, it's still much lower than last summer's peak inflation at 9.1%. Economists point to climbing rent and gas prices.
We filled up the tank this morning, and it was like $90. Last year, it was still expensive, but we don't think it was that much out here.
There are some things that we kind of stop buying or slow down on buying.
The White House remains positive on the economy despite today's data, saying, quote, annual inflation has fallen by around 2/3 since last summer, and inflation outside of food and energy has fallen to its lowest level in any 3-month period since September 2021. Adding, quote, we're growing the economy from the middle out and bottom up, lowering costs for hardworking families and making smart investments in America. With that, let's bring in Mark Hamrick, Washington Bureau Chief and Senior Economic Analyst for Bankrate. Mark, the administration likes to tout a strong economy. Do you think most Americans are feeling the effects of the economic growth the White House points to?
Well, I don't very often want to align myself with the talking points of elected officials generally, but rather just try to look at the facts as you're posing the question correctly. And so Americans, as we've seen in assessments of consumer confidence or consumer sentiment, are feeling better about the U.S. economy, but we also know that they aren't necessarily giving the Biden administration much or very, very much credit on that front. And so on the political front, that is the risk that the president has decided to take in sort of branding the economy as, Bidenomics. And we'll figure out 14 or so months from now whether that's going to be effective. It is correct that the inflation is well down from the peak. The job market remains very tight, in the words of Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. But we're still seeing big increases in prices over the past 2 years, which I think is the mindset that most consumers are taking, and mindful that, yes, some things are down from a year ago, some things are down from a month ago, but many things are up from 2 years ago. And I think that's probably the take that most Americans are really thinking about with respect to inflation.
What do you make of this latest increase? A fluke, something bigger? What are your thoughts?
It really does show us the so-called stickiness of inflation, particularly on the services side. And as we speak, there are a number of strikes or I would say very aggressive takes on the part of labor unions in making requests for wage increases, including the United Auto Workers. And that's what they do. That's part of organized labor. That's part of negotiation. But that also speaks to the underlying firmness of wage growth going forward. And so even though we see goods inflation relenting, services inflation still high, but also seeming to ease up, we see, for example, in this report that shelter, which we all need, is still high, but that tends to lag what's actually happening on the ground the way the CPI measures it. Food prices are still up. Energy prices broadly are down. But the reality is that many of the things that we all need to pay for just to live our everyday lives, well, they are higher than they were 2 years ago. And I think that's what aggravates consumers.
What do you think this means in terms of the Fed raising interest rates?
Investors are very confident right now with respect to their pricing in the Fed funds futures market that the Fed is done raising interest rates. The only problem with that is the Fed is not highly confident that it is yet done. And so the next meeting comes September 20th when we get the announcement and the news conference being held by Chairman Powell. And all of those officials will get one more major jobs report in the early part of next month. They'll get another set of the consumer price index data as well. So they'll have a lot to parse through and ponder as they make that decision. The financial markets may well have it right at this point to say the Fed is done or nearly done. But again, the Fed still needs to see the data to make that decision.
All right. Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Border crossings raising concern, but not where you might expect. The immigration issue you haven't heard much about when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Fentanyl is a leading cause of opioid-related deaths in America. In 2022, it caused more than 107,000 overdose deaths, a number more than double from just 2 years prior. The increase due in part to the deadly drug flowing over the southern border. In newly analyzed U.S. Customs and Border Protection data, Reuters found fentanyl seizures tripled in the last quarter of 2022. In nearly half of those cases, counterfeit opioid pills were discovered. According to the DEA, 6 in every 10 such pills contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. Moving to the issue of illegal immigration in America, the crisis at the southern border has made headlines for years. Far less discussed, however, is what's happening at the northern crossing with Canada. Authorities there are dealing with a migrant surge of their own. Reporter Mark Martin traveled to North Dakota for this report.
Vast open farmland, no fence or wall here, only a marker with the date October 20th, 1818. The day Great Britain and the United States established the boundary between the U.S. and Canadian territories. At more than 5,500 miles, this is the longest non-militarized open border in the world. This particular section is where a part of North Dakota meets Canada.
If people wanted to, they could cross here freely.
If people wanted to, they could come across at any time.
Stuart Symington is mayor of the border city, Nitchie.
Do you feel like the northern border is kind of neglected more? There's all this attention on the border in the south.
Oh, it's definitely overlooked. Everything's being covered down there, so this is an opening.
An opening, Symington says, for migrants wanting to cross the ditch into the U.S.
It's a cheap flight from Mexico to Winnipeg or to Regina, and then just hop and skip across the border. And if you have a runner on either side, you've got it made. And then they're dispersed and nobody ever sees them again.
A resident of nearby Pembina took us down an abandoned road where we found another open area.
I'm here at the U.S.-Canada border. You can see the post reads United States, and then over on this side, international boundary. This is just a short distance from the official border crossing, yet there's no security to prevent people from entering the country illegally.
According to reports, there has been a sharp increase in the number of migrants illegally crossing into the U.S. Our guide, who wanted to remain anonymous, says it's true.
I've just seen people in taxis coming over, leaving, people being dropped off, walking. They're not town people, so we know what they're doing.
Lance Lohr lives across the river in Minnesota.
I hunt just in Minnesota here, and I see suitcases and cell phones and stuff all over dropped. They just don't care. Yeah, I think they should be a little heavier patrol.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection back up these reports of a dramatic increase. So far, from last October through May of this year, stats show more than 115,000 encounters. Even with 4 months left in the fiscal year, that number already surpasses the yearly amount in each of the previous 3 years. Here in the Grand Forks sector, covering just North Dakota and Minnesota, the number of encounters is already more than double last fiscal year. North Dakota State Senator Yana Murdahl blames the federal government for the increase, accusing the Biden administration of giving up American sovereignty by giving up the border to illegal crossings.
We are advertising to the world that we're open, without any control, without any due process, without any legal way of doing it. It doesn't matter. You get awarded, if you can jump, swim, or run, right, and get into the country, you get awarded by the same rights as a citizen has.
Probably people think they got a lot better chance of sneaking across this northern border than they do the southern border.
Symington believes a tighter southern border will lead to more crossing attempts up here.
And the more they hear that our country's open, the more that's going to get people to come. And the sad part is you'll find in the northern part of the border, especially in the wintertime, people die.
Winter here, if it's 30 below or worse, and you get 50, 60 below wind chill, it is deadly. Even a mile walk can be deadly. So about 1.5 years ago, we had a family from India that was muled through, and they were told that north of the border about 2 miles. It was just 2 miles, just go cross. And a few days later, they were found frozen in the snowbanks up there.
And there is potential danger for these border residents as well.
I think some of the biggest issues are people coming into the United States that we truly don't want here. You know, these are people of an organized crime from other countries, people who perhaps have nefarious reasons for coming. Maybe they're a spy of a foreign nation.
There are drugs coming in. Families are worried about, what's being brought into the school. I know our law enforcement has seen a great increase in fentanyl trafficking and even deaths in Walsh County.
CBN News reached out to U.S. Customs and Border Protection about a solution to this issue. They declined our interview request and gave us this statement. A CBP spokesperson said, CBP deploys a mixture of personnel, technology, infrastructure, and partnerships appropriate to protect our country's northern border from irregular migration, narcotics, and other illegal activity unique to this operating environment. Migrants should not listen to the lies of smugglers and make the dangerous journey only to be sent back.
I know they use drones and other technology, and they do an excellent job, but it's too vast of an area to control completely.
Federal legislation to establish a center to coordinate northern border security is in the works. But North Dakota State Representative David Monson says that's not enough.
Our country is like a sieve. Our borders are wide open, except when you try to come across legally.
Monson told us U.S. leaders in this day and age need to step it up at all our borders when it comes to tightening security. Mark Martin, CBN News, on the border of North Dakota and Canada.
From unwanted to adopted, how Christians are stepping up in the fight against abortion. Abortion has long been a political lightning rod. That's become even more evident in the years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Many pro-life advocates see adoption as a solution to save the lives of unwanted babies, causing many Christians to step up and take action. Charlene Aaron brings us that story.
Before the historic court action, statistics showed Christians already more likely to adopt than other Americans. Now they are stepping up at an even bigger rate to grow their families and help children in need.
Since Dobbs' decision last June, we've definitely seen the church raise up and say we want to be available for adoption and foster care.
Herbie Newell serves as president and executive director of Lifeline Children's Services, one of the largest evangelical adoption agencies in the country.
We've seen the pro-life community really embrace the idea of adoption in ways that really we haven't for the last 49 years. I feel like we were so targeted on ending abortion that we kind of failed at times to look at what are the options that a woman has on the life side.
This all comes at a time, Newell says, the battle over adoption has never been greater.
Adoption has become a lot tougher, both domestically and internationally. Organizations have either compromised or exited child welfare altogether because of how difficult it is to stand firm to a biblical ethic of marriage and family in the world of child welfare today.
When the pandemic hit in 2020, border closings and lockdowns forced many countries to shut down their foreign adoption programs, an impact Newell points out that's still being felt today.
China has just now started to allow families to travel again for kids that were matched to them in 2019 before the pandemic began. And so certainly we need to call our state representatives, our senators. We need to advocate for these kids that have been matched to come home.
Back in the U.S., Newell says pro-life pregnancy centers must adjust to the changing face of abortion.
We need to make sure is that we're not just reaching the woman who's going to come into our clinic who's looking for a medical abortion, but they were able to get in almost real time connection with women who are seeking chemical abortion. And we need women to know that there's a reversal pill. This is really the face of crisis pregnancy, and it means that we're having to revolutionize the way that we look at reaching young women who are in that crisis.
That includes single women facing an unplanned pregnancy.
What that woman needs is not an abortion. That woman needs a community that's going to mentally and spiritually support her, wrap around her, and help her be able to accomplish her goals and her dreams while also bringing life to a child.
Meanwhile, Lifeline is recruiting kids to help make a difference through an initiative called Stand for Orphans, an idea started by kids for kids who need families.
And my son, who was about 8 or 9 at the time, said, you know what, Dad, if we could get 1,000 kids to do lemonade stands, the $20 we made yesterday would turn into $20,000. The next thing you knew, that first summer, they had raised over $100,000 for orphans and vulnerable children around the world.
I took a stand, and you can too.
Since that first summer, nearly $400,000 have been raised, and it's expanding as churches across the country are including the idea in their vacation Bible schools. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Finally tonight, fairs are known for out-of-the-box eating options. From deep-fried donuts to massive corn dogs, there is no shortage of good food. Now a big attraction at a central Pennsylvania fair is capitalizing on that for a good cause. Take a look at this bologna sandwich. That is 150 feet of bread, meat, and cheese, 1,200 slices of cheese to be exact. After assembly, volunteers cut the sandwich into 900 servings, each available for a $100 donation. Lebanon County Christian Ministries will use the money to help fight food insecurity in the area. And now I am hungry. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. We will see you tomorrow.